The battles of the past had carved their mark into history, but the fight was far from over. Beyond the smoke of war, a different kind of courage emerged, one not measured by the roar of guns or the clash of armies, but by the quiet, unyielding defiance of barriers built by fear and prejudice. In classrooms, courtrooms, offices, and training grounds, new warriors stepped forward, challenging limits. No one dared question. Every step into the unknown carried risk. Every act of determination defied the expectations of a world still clinging to old hierarchies. They fought with strategy, with vision, with an unwavering commitment to prove that talent and valor cannot be confined by skin, by status, or by history. The obstacles were invisible yet formidable, the opposition subtle yet relentless, and the victories often unrecognized at the time. Yet, with each barrier shattered, a new path opened for those who would follow. In this chapter, courage took on a different shape. Not the flash of battle, but the endurance to transform institutions, to inspire generations, and to demand a place where there had been none. The struggle continued, and through it, a truth became undeniable. History is not only forged on battlefields, but in every act of relentless will, in every stand against injustice, and in every choice to rise when the world expects you to fall. And as the story reaches its crescendo, it is clear that the legacy of these acts, bold, transformative, unforgettable, is still unfolding, echoing through time, and shaping the future that we inherit today. 16. Mac Ross. Mac Ross, born in 1912 in Selma, Alabama, grew up in a world defined by rigid racial divisions, limited educational opportunities, and a society that rarely imagined African Americans as aviators, let alone pioneers of military aviation. Yet from childhood, Ross harbored an intense fascination with flight. A fascination born not from privilege or access, but from a relentless curiosity and a determination to rise above the boundaries imposed on him. His early life was marked by hard work, perseverance, and an unwavering belief that the sky should belong to anyone courageous enough to reach for it. That belief carried him to Tuskegee Institute, where he excelled academically and demonstrated the discipline, intelligence, and focus needed for something far greater. When the United States launched its experimental program to train African American military pilots, later known as the Tuskegee Airmen, Ross became one of the first to step forward. Entering a program designed under the expectation that he and his peers would fail, Ross refused to be discouraged. He embraced the rigorous flight training with unmatched determination, mastering every aspect of aviation with precision and self-discipline. His instructors quickly recognized his talent, leadership, and calm under pressure. When the first class of Tuskegee pilots graduated in March 1942, Ross earned a place of honor. He became one of the first 5, the inaugural group of African American military aviators in United States history. This milestone was not only a personal triumph, it was a seismic moment in American military culture, a direct challenge to decades of racial prejudice and exclusion. With his wings earned, Ross continued to distinguish himself as both a pilot and a leader. He became a flight commander in the 99th Fighter Squadron, responsible for training new pilots and shaping the combat readiness of a unit whose very existence was under constant scrutiny from detractors who questioned the capability of black aviators. Ross's discipline, precision, and unwavering focus made him a stabilizing force within the squadron, a mentor whose standards became the foundation on which others built. Although he did not serve overseas due to an aircraft accident that claimed his life in 1942, his influence extended far beyond the missions he never had the chance to fly. Mac Ross embodied the breakthrough moment when African Americans first stepped into the role of military aviators, and his legacy became inseparable from the success of the Tuskegee Airmen who followed. The courage he displayed simply by earning his wings helped silence some of the era's most entrenched prejudices, and set the stage for future combat achievements that would force the military and the world to acknowledge the skill, bravery, and professionalism of Black pilots. His story serves as a reminder that not all heroes are defined by battlefield feats. Some earn their place in history by breaking barriers, shattering expectations, and inspiring generations through the example of their determination alone. Mac Ross stands as one of the foundational figures in African American military aviation, a man whose courage opened doors, whose dedication shaped the earliest chapters of the Tuskegee Airmen, and whose legacy continues to echo in every pilot who rises into the sky against the weight of doubt and discrimination. 17. James H. Meredith. James H. Meredith, born in 1933 in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, entered the world under one of the most oppressive racial climates in America, where segregation was enforced with violence and the idea of a Black man challenging state power was considered unthinkable. Raised in a sharecropping family that understood hardship as a daily reality, Meredith grew up with a fierce sense of discipline, self-reliance, and purpose, qualities that became sharper during his service in the United States Air Force. There, he developed the worldview, confidence, and strategic mind of a man who understood both the structure of authority and the courage required to confront it. By the time he left the military in 1960, he had already made a decision that would transform the trajectory of civil rights in America. Meredith resolved that he would enter the University of Mississippi, known as Ole Miss, a school that had never admitted a Black student and was symbolically guarded by decades of entrenched segregation. His decision was not a plea for acceptance. It was a deliberate act of resistance, a calculated confrontation with a system he believed violated the Constitution he had sworn to defend as a serviceman. When he applied for admission in 1961, Mississippi officials responded with obstruction, political maneuvering, and open hostility. Meredith fought back with legal precision, pursuing his case through the federal courts until the Supreme Court ruled in his favor, but the state refused to yield. Governor Ross Barnett personally blocked his enrollment, igniting a crisis that would pull the nation into one of the most violent civil rights showdowns of the era. In 1962, Meredith returned to campus under the protection of hundreds of U.S. Marshals, National Guardsmen, and federal troops, an extraordinary mobilization that underscored the gravity of the confrontation. That night, Ole Miss erupted into a deadly riot as segregationists hurled bricks, fired guns, and attacked federal officers in an attempt to stop a single man from attending class. Amid tear gas, gunfire, and chaos, Meredith remained resolute. His entrance into the university was not only a personal victory, but a symbolic strike at the heart of institutional segregation. For the next year, he walked the campus under armed guard, isolated but unbroken, determined to complete his education despite daily threats, harassment, and hostility. His graduation in 1963 marked more than the achievement of a degree. It marked the moment when one individual's determination forced the most resistant state in the South to comply with federal law, reshaping the future of civil rights across the nation. Meredith's mission did not end at Ole Miss. He continued to challenge injustice through activism, notably leading the 1966 March Against Fear, during which he was shot and wounded, but refused to abandon the effort, inspiring thousands to join the movement. James H. Meredith's legacy transcends the battlefield and the classroom. He stands as a symbol of strategic courage, moral clarity, and the power of individual defiance. His story proves that heroism is not only found in combat, but also in the willingness to confront systems built to crush one's dignity. By forcing the gates of Ole Miss open, Meredith changed the course of American history, demonstrating that even the most deeply entrenched institutions can be broken when a single individual stands firm with unwavering resolve, discipline, and the conviction that equality is worth every sacrifice. 18. Leonard Roy Harmon. Leonard Roy Harmon was not a man the world expected to remember. He was quiet, disciplined, and carried himself with the steady calm of someone who understood hardship early and learned to live above it. Born in Cuero, Texas in 1917, he grew up in a segregated America that offered young black men few paths forward. But Harmon found one place where he believed merit still mattered: the United States Navy. When he enlisted in 1939, he stepped into a world that would test his courage in ways he could never have imagined. At that time, the Navy allowed African Americans to serve only in restricted roles, most commonly as stewards. Harmon accepted the uniform not because the position was limiting, but because duty was not defined by titles. He trained rigorously, earning a reputation aboard the USS San Francisco as dependable, disciplined, and fiercely protective of the men around him. Those who served with him later recalled that he had an instinct for danger, a sixth sense that made him move faster, react quicker, and notice threats before others realized they were there. Nothing in his life, however, compared to the night of November 12, 1942, during the brutal naval battle of Guadalcanal. The USS San Francisco was thrown into one of the most violent close-range surface engagements of the entire Pacific War explosions. Ripped through steel, gunfire tore across the decks. The ship shook under the relentless pounding of Japanese fire. In the chaos, Harmon did not seek cover. Instead, he ran toward the screams, the smoke, and the shattered bodies left in the wake of enemy shells. Working alongside the ship's pharmacist's mate, he helped pull wounded sailors from exposed positions, carrying them through choking smoke and burning metal. Witnesses later recalled that the air was so thick with heat and debris that visibility shrank to almost nothing, yet Harmon moved as if guided by pure instinct, refusing to leave anyone behind. During one attempt to evacuate the wounded, the Japanese guns found their mark again. A barrage smashed into the ship, turning the deck into a deadly storm of splinters and shrapnel. Harmon saw an officer standing exposed, vulnerable to the next blast. Without hesitation, he threw himself between the officer and the incoming fire, using his own body as a shield. The explosion struck. Harmon absorbed the fragments meant for a fellow sailor. He collapsed within seconds, fatally wounded, but the man he protected lived. Leonard Roy Harmon's sacrifice was as profound as it was selfless. At a time when African American servicemen were denied the chance to fight as equals, he demonstrated a level of heroism that transcended the prejudices of his era. The Navy recognized this, awarding him the Navy Cross, one of the highest decorations for valor. Years later, a warship, the USS Harmon, would be named in his honor, making him the first African American to have a U.S. Navy vessel bear his name. His story is not only a tale of courage under fire, it is a reminder of the countless black servicemen whose bravery reshaped what heroism looked like in America. Harmon served in a role the Navy tried to minimize, yet in his final moments, he embodied everything the uniform was meant to represent: duty, sacrifice, and unbreakable loyalty. Leonard Roy Harmon did not survive the night at Guadalcanal, but the legacy he forged, the life he protected, the standard he set, lives far beyond the battle that claimed him. In the quiet courage of men like him, history found its truest soldiers. 19. Lee Archer. Lee Archer's story begins long before he ever touched the controls of a fighter aircraft. Born in 1919 in Yonkers, New York, he grew up during a time when the sky itself seemed to have boundaries for African Americans. Pilots were celebrated as modern knights, but black aviators were dismissed as a fantasy. Archer, however, was built from a quieter kind of defiance, the kind that grows in silence, shaped by discipline rather than rebellion. As a young man, he devoured books about aviation and spent hours watching aircraft arc across the sky, imagining a future that America still refused to believe he could claim. When World War II erupted, he tried to enlist in the Army Air Corps, only to be rejected solely because of his race. The message was clear: the sky was not meant for him. But Archer refused to accept this as the end of his story. When the Tuskegee Airmen program opened, he seized the opportunity with the determination of someone who had waited his entire life for a single door to unlock. Training at Tuskegee was harsh, unforgiving, and designed to prove that black pilots were incapable of matching their white counterparts. Yet Archer excelled, not simply meeting expectations but redefining them. Instructors remembered him as precise, focused, and unshakably calm, a pilot who treated every maneuver as a promise he intended to keep. By 1944, Archer was flying with the famed 332nd Fighter Group, the Red Tails, over the skies of Europe. There, he found the ultimate test of skill, nerve, and endurance. Combat missions over enemy territory were long and brutal. Pilots faced flak exploding like dark flowers in the air, German fighters slicing through the sky, and the constant pressure of protecting the bombers that relied on them. Archer thrived in this chaos. His situational awareness was instinctive, his marksmanship lethal. On October 12, 1944, he achieved what would cement his place in aviation history, shooting down 4 enemy aircraft in a single day, making him one of the war's most successful African-American fighter aces. But numbers alone do not capture Archer's significance. What truly defined him was how he carried himself outside the cockpit. He understood that every mission, every victory, every flawless escort was more than a military duty. It was a statement. The Red Tails were constantly scrutinized, waiting for any mistake that could justify the prejudice that shadowed them. Archer fought not only for survival, but for dignity, for possibility, for the right of future generations to look to the sky without barriers. After the war, Archer continued to serve, transitioning into roles that allowed him to break more than just aerial records. He became a diplomat, a business leader, and a mentor, proving that his discipline and intellect were as sharp on the ground as they had been in the air. Despite his accomplishments, recognition came slowly and too late as the country struggled to confront its long history of denying credit to black servicemen. Archer never complained. Instead, he let his achievements speak for themselves. In time, history caught up. He was celebrated as one of the most skilled and respected pilots of the Tuskegee Airmen, a man who proved that excellence needs no permission. Lee Archer died in 2010, but his legacy remains indelible, etched into the sky he fought so hard to own. His life is a testament to resilience, courage, and the quiet determination of a man who refused to let the world define his limits. Lee Archer did not simply fly. He broke barriers at full throttle, carving a path wide enough for generations to follow. 20. Alfred Masters. Alfred Masters' journey into American military history began with a signature, one that would quietly but permanently alter the identity of the U.S. Marine Corps. Born in 1916 in Oklahoma, he came of age in a country that celebrated freedom loudly yet restricted it sharply. Masters was not a man drawn to speeches or spotlight. He was defined instead by his steadiness, the kind of calm strength that never announces itself yet cannot be overlooked. When World War II erupted, he was working ordinary jobs, living an ordinary life, unaware that history was preparing to pull him into extraordinary territory. In 1942, President Roosevelt authorized the Marine Corps to accept African Americans for the first time. To many, it was a footnote in wartime policy. To Masters, it was a doorway few believed would ever open. When he approached the recruiting office, he had no intention of making history, he simply wanted to serve. But on June 1, 1942, Alfred Masters became the first African American ever sworn into the U.S. Marine Corps, an act that shattered a 167-year barrier. He did not step out as a symbol or hero, yet his presence alone forced the Corps to confront change it had resisted for generations. Training awaited him at Montford Point, a segregated camp carved out of the North Carolina woods. The place was hot, humid, and deliberately isolated, a reminder of the Marine Corps' reluctance to integrate even as the nation fought for global freedom. Masters endured long marches through sand that swallowed each step, punishing drills, and the unspoken challenge of proving that Black Marines deserved to wear the same uniform. His instructors tested him relentlessly, but they also recognized his reliability. Masters was not reckless, not loud, and not easily broken. He absorbed hardship with a quiet discipline that earned respect without ever demanding it. As more African American recruits arrived, they looked to Masters not because he sought leadership, but because he represented possibility. He became a steady hand in the chaos of early training, the one who had navigated the path before anyone else. While many Montford Point Marines later became celebrated fighters in the Pacific, Masters' influence worked in a different direction. He bridged transitions, guided newcomers, and helped transform a segregated battalion into a formidable force that the Marine Corps could no longer ignore. Unlike some wartime figures whose stories center on frontline heroics, Masters' impact lived in the institutional shift he symbolized. His presence forced policy to bend. His service validated the thousands of Black Marines who followed him, and his steady commitment helped reshape a branch of the military that once swore it would never accept men like him. Even after leaving the Marines, Masters carried himself with the same unassuming resolve that had defined his service. He returned to civilian life without fanfare, working, raising a family, and watching from a distance as the Marine Corps slowly evolved into one of the most diverse branches of the U.S. military. Decades later, when the nation finally acknowledged the Montford Point Marines with the Congressional Gold Medal, Alfred Masters' name resurfaced, no longer an administrative footnote but a foundational figure. History remembered what he never boasted about, that he was the first to step forward, the first to endure the storm, and the first to prove that the Marine Corps could and would include African Americans in its ranks. Alfred Masters did not seek glory. Yet, by walking through a door that had been closed for generations, he changed the Marine Corps forever. His legacy lives not in dramatic battlefield stories, but in the quiet courage of a man whose single act of enlistment became the spark for an entire movement of service, sacrifice, and long overdue recognition. 21st. Reginald Lewis. Reginald Lewis did not enter the world of American history through the blast of artillery or the chaos of battlefield smoke. His battlefield was the boardroom, yet his influence shaped the nation's economic and strategic landscape in ways that echoed far beyond corporate walls. Born in 1942 in Baltimore's East Side, a neighborhood marked by tight streets, relentless ambition, and the quiet hum of working-class life, Lewis learned early that the world rarely offered opportunities. It had to be challenged, negotiated with, and ultimately transformed. From childhood, he carried a sharp intuition for leadership. Teachers noticed the way he examined problems, not with impatience, but with precision. When he captained his high school football team, he did not rely on size or strength. He commanded the field with calculation and nerve. That same strategic mind would eventually make him one of the most influential Black businessmen in American history. Yet before his corporate victories, Lewis stepped into the rigid discipline of military life as part of the U.S. Army EROTC program during his time in college. It exposed him to chain-of-command structure, operational thinking, and the foundational discipline that later shaped his approach to business negotiations that felt at times like combat missions. After graduating from Virginia State College, Lewis entered Harvard Law School, not through wealth, legacy, or connections, but through pure, undeniable merit. There, he demonstrated the same intensity soldiers show when mastering battlefield tactics. He organized information meticulously, analyzed opponents' strategies, and dissected legal frameworks with unwavering focus. When other students were satisfied to meet expectations, Lewis pushed further, determined to understand the entire architecture of power. His rise through the legal world was swift. He founded his own law firm, making it one of the first black-led firms specializing in corporate law. What set him apart was not just ambition, it was a field commander mentality. Lewis treated negotiations like campaigns, identifying terrain, calculating leverage, and striking only when the advantage was absolute. This tactical precision culminated in the acquisition that would redefine corporate history: the $985 million leveraged buyout of Beatrice International Foods. It was a deal so complex and audacious that seasoned executives doubted it could ever be completed. But Lewis proved them wrong, turning the company into one of the largest black-owned enterprises in the world. His success sent shockwaves through America. In an era still shadowed by racial barriers, Lewis stood as living proof that brilliance could slice through obstacles once thought impenetrable. His achievements reshaped perceptions of what black leadership could look like in high-level corporate and economic arenas. And while he was not a soldier in uniform, his strategic victories influenced national economic competitiveness and opened paths for future generations to step into positions of real power. Despite his immense wealth, Lewis never abandoned the communities that forged him. He funded scholarships, educational programs, and initiatives aimed at empowering young people whose futures might otherwise remain confined by circumstance. His philanthropy was not an afterthought, but a mission, a recognition that legacies are built not solely on personal triumph, but on the doors one leaves open behind. When Reginald Lewis passed away in 1993, the nation mourned a visionary whose life illuminated a different dimension of American strength: the power of intellect, strategy, and fearless ambition. His story remains a testament to a man who confronted systemic limitations not with rage, but with mastery. He did not march into history with a rifle or a medal. He entered with a pen, a plan, and a determination so formidable that the world was forced to take notice. Reginald Lewis changed American history by proving that leadership, like courage, is not limited to the battlefield. Sometimes it emerges in boardrooms, in contracts, in ideas, and in the unwavering will of a man who refused to accept the limits that others tried to set. In the end, these 22 heroes stand as living proof that American history was never shaped by a single path, a single face, or a single voice. It was built by men and women who rose from obscurity, from oppression, from silence, and still chose courage. Some fought with rifles in their hands, others with aircraft beneath their wings, and some with nothing more than conviction burning fiercely in their hearts. But all of them rewrote the boundaries of what this nation believed was possible. Their stories remind us that heroism is not born from perfect moments. It emerges from impossible ones. It appears when a sailor refuses to abandon his shipmates, when a pilot challenges gravity and prejudice at the same time, when a soldier stands firm against overwhelming odds, or when a visionary pushes open the doors the world tries to keep shut. These are not just tales of battlefield triumphs. They are chapters of resilience, sacrifice, and relentless willpower. And the legacy they leave behind is not made of medals or monuments. It lives in the freedoms defended, the institutions strengthened, the barriers broken, and the generations inspired. Their courage continues to shape the country we walk through today, a country still struggling, still striving, still learning from those who dared to push it forward. As the echoes of their footsteps fade into history, they leave us with a simple truth: greatness is not inherited, it is chosen. And every one of us carries the power to choose it. Whether in moments of crisis or in the quiet decisions no one else sees, we too can move the world forward. The story of these heroes does not end here. It continues with the next generation of dreamers, fighters, leaders, and believers. It continues with you.